Hey, seventh graders, Mr. Allard with another one of your flip lessons today. We've had a little bit of issues with our system, so let me get this set up for you really quick. Let's try this again. Let's see how this is going to work for us today. Screen Cast-O-Matic isn't working, so I'm trying another screen system that's not as good as our other ones. A little bit different, but we'll try it. You should have your French and Indian War notes already in your interactive notebook. You should know how to do it. Put them in the your bolded underlined terms in the blank. Here we go. All right, let me get this all up there for you. So, background of the French and Indian War. As we know, there's a. Let me see if I can slide this. Here we go. Long-standing rivalry between France and England, dating back to the colonial time period. As you can see on the map, there's some disputed land between these two. The war is going to be fought in America and Canada, 1754 to 1763. It's also going to be fought. A big chunk of it is going to be fought in Europe, the Caribbean, and places like that. So really, this is going to be the First World War. This is also going to be known as the 7 Years' War, even though I know it says 1754 to 1763. Really, the war doesn't really start until 1756 officially, even though there are some small battles in 1754. So they call it the 7 Years' War over in Europe because it lasted for 7 years. Let's get this on there. Oop, went too far. Causes of the French Indian War. England is worried about French forts there being built in the Ohio River Valley. And the Ohio River Valley is a really good farmland that was disputed by both. Try to get out of the way again. Was disputed by both the French and the English. Basically, both people claimed it. And this is the really big sticking point between this area. France had a lot of land, but they didn't have a lot of people. England didn't have a lot of land in their colonies, but they had way more. They had a much bigger population, so they're expanding westward. They're running into French territory, and we're getting some disagreements about just who controls this land. And usually, if there's enough of a disagreement between two countries, a war is going to break out. Our first conflicts. This guy should look pretty familiar to you. Um, Much younger than we're used to seeing. Uh, the colony of Virginia is going to send George Washington into Ohio in 1754. Basically, his job is to get the French out of the forts. Well, he doesn't have a lot of experience. He's not given a lot of troops. He hopes to capture Fort Duquesne, but he's defeated. He's forced to retreat and rebuild it for necessity. Gets that name because they had to build it. It wasn't, the best fort in the world. He is quickly defeated by France and Native Americans. He's forced to retreat, and quite honestly, very, very lucky to come back with his life. He wasn't sent with a big enough force. Obviously, if you're going to take a fort, you need a substantially larger force than the people you're fighting. He simply didn't have that, ran out of supplies. His soldiers, these aren't British regulars, they were militia, and we'll talk about the issues with them a little bit later. But the first kind of skirmishes did not go so well with the British. So Britain sees, okay, well, we sent Washington to do what the British regulars should have done. Big mistake. So they're going to send this guy, General Braddock, in, and his job is to get the French out of this Ohio River Valley. He is defeated very soon and killed by a French Native American ambush. Now, this is the problem that the British are going to face. The British are known as the Redcoats. Well, guess what sticks out like a sore thumb in the woods? A bright red coat. The French have been much more connected to their Native American allies. They basically combined French firepower and Native American tactics. So they're using a lot of guerrilla warfare. They're using a lot of camouflage. They're using sneak attacks and things like that. And it's the British are not catching up to these new tactics. But this is going to lead to war being declared in 1756. So that is going to lead us to kind of our tail of the tape, so to speak. Let me get this, put it over here. That's going to leave us to our tail of the tape, so to speak. Let's just move that. And what's going to happen here is the England and France are going to rely on Native American allies. For England, that's going to be the Iroquois. For France, that's going to be the Algonquins, the Hurons, and the Ottawas. These two tribes were kind of mortal enemies themselves. Now, here's where you see the big difference. The colonial population of England is about 1 million. The French colonial population is 70,000. So much more troops can be drawn from that colonial population in England and France. Colonial activities, the England has towns, it has trades, it has farms that it can use to supply its troops. France is relying on fur trading, a lot of missionaries, a lot of priests. So a lot of issues there with being able to supply troops during the long haul of a war. Early battles. Again, France is kind of racking up the early wins here. They quickly take British forts at Lake Ontario and Lake George. Make that any smaller, but you can kind of get most of it here. Lake Ontario and Lake George. France's Native American allies are also going to cause havoc on the New York and Virginia frontiers. Basically, they're going to be raiding towns and villages and houses and sending colonists scurrying back to the East Coast and cities. The first 3 years of the war are really dominated by the French, but they don't have that real big major battle victory. They have a lot of good, solid battles, but not something that we would call decisive victory. They win major victories at Fort Oswego, at Fort Ticonderoga, in Fort William Henry. Oswego and Ticonderoga being in New York, Fort William Henry being farther down in kind of the Virginia area. But basically, what is happening is the French are winning more battles until the British soldiers get to the colonies. I forgot to get rid of that slide. We'll just go past that. Turning point for the gotta go back. Sorry. Turning point for the Britain is going to be the hiring of William Pitt. And yes, William Pitt. Pittsburgh is named after him. He becomes the foreign minister, kind of the person who's going to be running the war for Britain in 1758. First thing he does is make peace with Native Americans. So a lot of Native Americans are now going to help the British. They're also not going to help the French, which is kind of a key point. Also, Britain is going to start adopting Native American strategies. They're going to use their militia to kind of do these kind of sneak, small kind of battle type things, and then try to draw the French out into these major battles that the British soldiers feel like they're more trained and able to defeat the French in. So in September 1759, we start to see a string of major British battles. British General James Wolfe leads a surprise attack and captures the city of Quebec in Canada, which is a major city for Quebec. In those battles that the French were winning. Yes, they were winning battles and connecting forts, but they weren't attacking and taking over major cities. Britain also has a victory at Fort Niagara, and this is going to be important because if you've ever been to Niagara, or the Niagara Falls, you know that that's right between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. That's going to cut off the French frontier forts. They can't use that waterway to send troops and supplies to those forts, so Britain can take them over, which is going to lead England to eventual victory in the war. It's going to be a slow process, right? 1759, 1760. About 3 more years of war is going to happen before France inevitably decides to stop. Try to get these last ones kind of in here. France lost Canadian colonies and claims land of the east of the Mississippi River. England has got all the territory in Canada, Florida, the rights to Caribbean slave trade, and Spain got French territory